Jeff Sessions declared on June 11th that women who are fleeing domestic violence in their home countries and come into the United States can no longer qualify for asylum because of it. He said that domestic violence is private violence, and to be considered for asylum, survivors would have to prove in a court of law that the government condoned the private actions or demonstrated an inability to protect victims. So, a few things. Globally, nearly half of all women who are murdered are killed by an intimate partner, and 1 in 3 women globally will report being abused by their intimate partner. And this is from the World Health Organization, which has cited violence against women, specifically domestic abuse, to be a major public health issue. And Jeff Sessions is essentially saying, no, it's not. It's a family matter, and it's not the government's job to protect women suffering from abuse in their own homes. Now, I want to quickly point out that, of course, any gender can be abusive, any partner can be abusive in any relationship, but this issue worldwide disproportionately affects women, and in general, in talking about this ruling, asylum seekers coming here on DV grounds tend to be women and children. And I think just, again, looking at this, framing it as public or private violence, and placing this burden to prove that the government condoned it. I mean, in a lot of stories I read, police in home countries won't even take reports, or they don't follow up. So if there's no documentation, it's going to be really hard for a survivor to prove that the government was condoning it. And I mean, I think too, for many women in domestic violence situations, calling the police is effectively signing a death warrant. Every movement is controlled. Every action is controlled. And what we see with, in terms of social justice and trauma on top of trauma, when we see what is happening at the border with these families being ripped apart, young children being placed into these camps, I mean, these atrocities that are happening right now in our country, we have to also recognize that many of these families are coming here fleeing domestic violence. So they've suffered violence in their home countries. They've braved trauma to come here, and we're just callously destroying them and re-traumatizing them. I mean, I don't have words. It's beyond unconscionable. And then again, from a human sexuality perspective, this ruling also kind of made me think about the fact that it wasn't until 1993 that spousal rape was illegal in all 50 states. And that's not even 30 years ago. And again, I'm speaking in a very heteronormative place, and of course, relationship violence and sexual assault can happen to all people, not just women in heterosexual marriages. But with the United States has, always sort of held up heterosexual marriage as this like beautiful institution and extension of intimacy. But when we think about the fact that it wasn't even 30 years ago where it was totally fine for a husband to literally rape his wife, there was no legal recourse for him raping his wife. We have to kind of think about what this means in terms of how we conceptualize of this union between a man and a woman. I think until fairly recently, women were sort of considered to be the property of their husbands, and in many cases they still are. It was, and they're the sexual objects of their husbands. And we sort of had moved past that a bit and granted greater rights to women. And now this administration, which has based its entire platform on hatefully deciding whose lives have meaning and whose don't, has essentially declared that non-American women and implicitly non-white women don't have a basic human right to be safe in their own homes. So again, I'm way over time at this point, but I think this issue brings up a lot of issues in terms of how we conceptualize of marriage and how we conceptualize of the right for women to basically live a life free of abuse and free of violence at the hands of their intimate partners.